Good evening to all the participants. I welcome you all on behalf of Madras Tax Bar. Today, I welcome Mr. Arvind Srivaths, who has consented to give this talk on a very important topic, and which is one of the burning issues right now, which is applicability of electronic records under evidence. So, he will give a presentation on it, and at the end of the presentation, we will have the discussion round where you can put in your queries or you can supplement if there's anything more to be added upon. So thank you, Arvind, for joining us today, and thank you all for taking out your time and for joining the session. Uh, Over to you, Arvind. You can start sharing your screen also.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Madras Tax Bar for giving me this wonderful opportunity. First, to connect with all of you when courts have been closed for about 4 to 5 months now. I'd like to thank Swaminathan sir, AP Srinivasan sir, Hemlata ma'am, and Prithvi for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And I'd like to thank all of you for being present in this webinar. I'll just start with the screen sharing. Prithvi, is my screen being shared?
It's fine, Arvind.
So we are going to basically look into some detail, Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act, which relates to admissibility of electronic records in evidence. I've just tried to capture the most important aspects of this provision and the history of this provision vis-a-vis courts in India. So the Indian Evidence Act 1872 came into force on the 1st of September 1870. The object of the act was to enact a law relating to evidence to firstly assist the court to pronounce judgments based on conclusions on facts of the case. So what is the purpose of this law? The primary purpose of the Evidence Act is to provide a mechanism to place evidence before a court of law to prove a fact. The word prove is defined in the Evidence Act in Section 3. Proved is defined as a fact is said to be proved when, after considering the matters before it, the court either believes it to exist or considers its existence so probable that a prudent man ought, under circumstances of the particular case, to act upon the supposition that it exists. So I'd like to stress here on two words. One is proved, and two, the matters before it. So the court is not compelled to look only at documents. It's not compelled to look only at pleadings. The court can look at all the surrounding events. That is why the expression used there is matters before it. So wide powers have been given to court while treating evidence. So what facts do we place before court? So to understand what a fact is, we look at the definition under Section 3. Fact means, firstly, anything, state of things, relation of things capable of being perceived by senses. Secondly, any mental condition of which a person is conscious. So we often see documentary evidences are placed before court, and sometimes we examine witnesses by oral evidence to say some facts are peculiarly within the knowledge of the person. So oral evidence has to be given on what the person is conscious of, peculiarly within his knowledge. Then we see the definition of the term facts in issue. Any fact from which, either by itself or in connection with other facts, the existence, non-existence, nature or extent of any right, liability or disability, asserted or denied in any suit or proceeding, necessarily follows. We then have to see what is a document and what is evidence. Document means any matter expressed or described upon any substance by means of letters, figures or marks, or by more than one of those means intended to be used or which may be used for the purpose of recording that matter. So what is the use of reading all these definitions? The use is to present all this as evidence before court. So what is evidence. Evidence is given an inclusive definition. It says it includes all statements which the court permits or requires to be made before it by a witness in relation to matters of fact under inquiry. Such statements are called oral evidence. And all documents, including electronic records, produced for the inspection of the court, such documents are called documentary evidence. So evidence, the definition regarding documents has been included with the words electronic records, which will have some relevance when we discuss about this topic a little further. So broadly, the Evidence Act provides for these three broad categories of evidence, namely primary and secondary, oral and documentary, direct, indirect, circumstantial, or hearsay evidence. What is primary evidence? Primary evidence means the document itself. So we all know the golden evidence rule, which is a party approaching a court or a party against whom a litigation has been instituted, best evidence has to be placed before court to prove or disprove a fact. So primary evidence is regarded as the best evidence because the document based on which a case is built itself is placed before court. So nothing better than the document itself will speak. Section 62 defines primary evidence as the document itself. Section 64 talks about how a primary evidence is to be proved. And it says documents must be proved by primary evidence except in cases under section 65. Now if we see what section 65 is, we have to see section 63. 62 defines primary evidence and 63 defines secondary evidence. Examples give 5 instances are given to say these are secondary evidences. One is certified copy of a document. 2 copies made from original by a mechanical process. 3 copies compared with the original. 4 counterpart of documents. And 5 oral accounts of contents of a document from a person who has seen it. So how do we prove secondary evidence? Proof of documents by secondary evidence shall be in accordance with section 65 by seeking leave of court. Possession with adversary, etc. have to be proved. So 65 states that secondary evidence can be placed before court only by seeking leave of court. The reason for this is the court will examine prima facie why the person is not able to produce the original, and based on facts and circumstances of each case would either permit or deny permission for secondary evidence to be placed. So the scheme of the Evidence Act divides oral and documentary evidence in the following chapters. Chapter 4 deals with oral evidence, which is sections 59 and 60. Chapter 5 deals with documentary evidence, which is between sections 61 to 90 capital A of the Act. For the purpose of today's discussion, one other law requires to be referred to, which is the Information Technology Act 2000. The Information Technology Act came into force on 17th of October 2000, and one of the main objects of this act was to give legal recognition for electronic data interchange. So consequent to bringing into force of Information Technology Act, several provisions of the Indian Evidence Act were amended or new provisions were introduced. Some of the new provisions that were introduced are 22 capital A, 45 capital A, 65 capital A, 65 capital B, among others. So for the purposes of today's discussion, we will concentrate on 65 capital B and a reference to 65 capital A to begin with. 65B has 5 subsections. The most important ones are 65B1, 65B2 and 65B4. 65B1, I'll just read the provision so that we understand the exact intention of this particular provision. It begins by saying, notwithstanding anything contained in this act. So, non-obstante clause. So, section 65B has been held to be a self-contained code or a code in itself. So, for the purpose of an electronic record, no other provision can be referred to. It says any information contained in an electronic record, which is printed on a paper, stored, recorded, or copied in optical or magnetic media, produced by a computer. hereinafter referred to as a computer output, shall be deemed to be also a document if the conditions mentioned in this section are satisfied in relation to the information and computer in question, and shall be admissible in any proceedings without further proof or production of the original as evidence of any contents of the original or of any fact stated therein of which direct evidence would be admissible. So here, if you see, I have highlighted some portions in different colors. One, to say non-obstante, we have already seen. Two, this provision strictly applies to electronic records. Three, it shall be deemed also to be a document, which means electronic record is being deemed, a deeming fiction is created by this provision, and it shall be admissible without further production of the original. We will see the relevance of these words in the slides to come. The next provision I had told you is 65B2. 65B2 and 65B4 are to satisfy two requirements or to satisfy two main components of section 65B. One is the information and the computer. 65B2 basically requires us to state on oath by filing a certificate stating that the computer must have produced the output in a period when it was regularly used to store, process such information, regularly carried out by a person in lawful control of it. Secondly, during the said time, the said information must have been regularly fed in ordinary course of activities. The computer was operating properly. Electronic record which is placed before court must be an exact copy of what is contained in the original. 65B4 is more on the technical aspect of one, identifying the electronic record containing the statement, describing the manner in which it was produced, giving particulars of devices involved in production of that electronic record, dealing with other matters which we had seen in 65B2. And 65B4 concludes by saying it should be signed by a person purportedly occupying a responsible official position in relation to the computer in question. And the provision also says it is sufficient if the person who produces the certificate says that what he has sworn to in the certificate is to the best of his knowledge. Why this is important is because the person who is producing the electronic record produces a certificate vouching safe two things. One, the source from which the copy has been placed before court has not been tampered with. Two, during the entire relevant period, the electronic device or the computer was in a good working condition. These two requirements are to vouchsafe the source. 65B3 and 65B5, as I already said, are largely in technical nature. So now we have to see how courts have treated section 65B. Before we go on, I will give an example of how 65B becomes relevant in day-to-day practice before courts. The classic example I can give you is emails that we place before court. We hardly see certificates being placed before court for any email that we place in reliance of any case. We take a printout from what the client sends us. It is printed, scanned and filed as a typeset before the honorable court. On the other hand, 65B mandates that a certificate has to be given on how it has been produced. So it requires a certificate to be given by a person. For example, if I am going to place the email before court, I will have to download it from, say, my Google account to my local computer, place it in optical or magnetic medium, meaning a compact disc or a pen drive, a USB pen drive. And I'll have to tell the court, I downloaded it from my account. It was sent by X to me on such and such date. I downloaded, I transferred the downloaded content into a compact disc and the same is placed before. And I will have to swear to the court that the computer was working in good condition and the source has not been tampered with. This is the basic requirement what 65B mandates. So how have courts seen 65B? So before I begin how courts have seen, one thing that we have to note is before 65B, that is before the year 2000, voice recordings were placed before court in the form of cassettes. A famous case of election petitions where voice recordings, sound recordings, and recordings from loudspeakers were placed before court by form of VCR cassettes and regular cassettes, which we no more see today. Courts were treating those documents, if the recording was placed, courts were seeing that as secondary evidence. They used to listen to the contents of the recorded version, and if required, expert opinion was sent to whether to find out there was any tampering with the documents. Of course, now technology has advanced, and that has necessitated Information Technology Act to come. We often see morphing and lot of activities that are being done to tamper with electronic records so easily, and it is very difficult for us to find out that they have in fact been tampered with. So 65B is a safeguard that at least vouches safe that the electronic record is not tampered with in the form of a certificate. So the first case that dealt with 65B, which is the amended provision of the Evidence Act, was the State versus Mohammed Afzal and others. This is also known as the parliamentary attack case. The citation is 107/2003 Delhi Law Times 385. In this, the question of admissibility of an electronic record under 65B was considered for the first time by the Honorable Delhi High Court. The issue before the Delhi High Court was whether the call records can be admitted in evidence without a certificate under section 65B. The prosecution that placed the electronic record argued before court that the conditions under 65B2 were satisfied through the testimony of the prosecution witness. They argue that the prosecution witness came before court and said he had received the electronic record in such and such manner. It was fed into a computer and computed to the compact disc and thereafter placed before court. And that testimony was signed by him after it was recorded in court. So therefore, that should be perceived or that should be taken as a certificate as required under 65B. The Delhi High Court accepted this argument and said the oral testimony of the relevant witness would suffice and that 65B4 was merely an alternative mode of proof. Meaning, if a certificate is not produced, but an oral testimony of the necessary conditions in 65B is available, then a certificate need not be filed. This was thereafter confirmed and upheld in the case of State of Delhi versus Navjot Sandhu. This is reported in 2005, 11 Supreme Court cases, page 600. In this, the Honorable Supreme Court said, even if requirements under 65B4 were not satisfied, evidence could be produced under 63 and 65 of the Evidence Act, which we saw a little earlier, which is secondary evidence. The decision in Navjot Sandhu led to electronic evidences and electronic records being filed as documents in court without a certificate and being proven as secondary evidence. So this decision was in the year 2005 and it was holding the field for almost 10 years when a larger bench of 3 honorable judges overruled Navjot Sandhu. This happened in the case of P.V. Anwar versus P.K. Bashir, reported in 2014, 10 Supreme Court cases, 473. The 3-judge bench of the Honorable Supreme Court heard an election petition. This election petition was challenging the election of Mr. P.K. Bashir of the Kerala Legislative Assembly in their 2011 elections. The election petitioner relied on certain songs, speeches, and announcements used for election propaganda to make it fall within corrupt practices within the Representation of People Act 1951. A CD was filed into court without a certificate under section 65B. So the Supreme Court was called on to decide whether or not that CD is admissible in evidence. While overruling Navjot Sandhu, certain important findings were given by the Supreme Court which clearly laid down the law insofar as 65B is concerned. I have just tried to capture the most important findings of the judgment. Firstly, The first finding is section 65B begins with a non-obstructive clause, and therefore it is a special or a self-contained code. It's a special law. This they held by referring to the doctrine of generalia specialibus non derogant, which means the special excludes the general law. So the court further held that being a self-contained code, 65B being a self-contained code, the general law of secondary evidence, namely 63 and 65, has to yield and will not apply. The Supreme Court, while overruling Navjot Sandhu, further held that an electronic record by way of secondary evidence shall not be admitted in evidence unless requirements under 65B are satisfied. The court further held that an electronic record shall be accompanied by the certificate in terms of 65B obtained at the time of taking the document, which means the document has to be filed along with the certificate, without which the secondary evidence pertaining to that electronic record is inadmissible. Paragraph 14 is very important, and it has been widely interpreted by courts in future in the further judgments that we will see. So I have just highlighted the important portion of para 14, which says the very admissibility of such a document, which is an electronic record, which is called as a computer output, depends on satisfaction of the 4 conditions mentioned under 65B2. So the court said only if the conditions are satisfied, it can even be looked into or it can even be admitted. Paragraph 15 further clarifies or acts as an addendum to para 14, which says, if it is desired to give a statement in any proceeding pertaining to an electronic record, it is permissible if certain conditions mentioned are complete. Though the language of 65B4 uses the words a certificate doing any of the following things, in Anwar's case, the Supreme Court held all the conditions under 65B4 must be complied with, for the document to be admissible. Paragraph 22 of the judgment gives the reasoning why the court has overruled Navjot Sandhu's case. So they say it appears that the court omitted to take note of 59 and 65 capital A dealing with admissibility of electronic record. Section 63 and 65 have no application in the case of secondary evidence by way of electronic record. The same is wholly governed by sections 65A and 65B. To that extent, the statement of law on admissibility of secondary evidence pertaining to electronic record, as stated by this court in Navjot Sandhu's case, does not lay down the correct legal position. It requires to be overruled, and we do so. Para 22, they further say, thus, in the case of CD, VCD, chip, etc., the same shall be accompanied by the certificate in terms of section 65B obtained at the time of taking the document, without which secondary evidence pertaining to that electronic record is inadmissible. Paragraph 24 is very important. Paragraph 24, the Supreme Court has basically laid out the law to say the situation would have been different had the appellant adduced primary evidence before us. So the Supreme Court has carved out an exception of applicability of section 65B to say if the original document was placed before us, the situation would have been different. And if you see the last but 2 lines which have been highlighted in blue, if an electronic record as such is used as primary evidence under section 62 of Evidence Act, same is admissible in evidence without compliance of conditions under 65B. So this created some sort of ambiguity to see whether 62 alone can be made to apply when the court has held 63 and 65 cannot apply. Having held that 65B is a self-contained code and no other provision can be looked into, the difference in view by other courts was having held so whether 62 can be held to apply for primary evidence. So post Anwar, what happened? Anwar was a decision of 3 honorable judges. Post Anwar, about a year later, Tommaso Bruno vs. State of UP reported in 2015 7 SEC 178. This was also a decision by 3 honorable judges of the Supreme Court. I have encapsulated the findings in paragraphs 24 and 25, which took a direct contrary view to Anwar. In fact, the decision on Anwar was not referred to in Tommaso. The court then confirmed Navjot Sandhu or toed line from Navjot Sandhu and said, it based its finding by saying secondary evidence of contents of a document, which is an electronic record, can be let in under section 65. So now two parallel decisions, one which says it is mandatory and two which confirmed the old position, came into interpretation by courts from time to time. Parallelly, Anwar's case was confirmed by various decisions across the country by the Supreme Court and basically our Madras High Court. In Harpal Singh versus State of Punjab, reported in 2017, one Supreme Court case is 734. Anwar was directly applied and held to be correct law. Vikram Singh versus State of Punjab, reported in 2017, 8 SEC 518, which is also a decision by 3 honorable judges. Paragraph 26 again applied and affirmed the decision in Anwar's case. And our Madras High Court in K. Ramajay versus Inspector of Police, reported in 2016, two current Tamil Nadu cases, 135, applied paragraph 24 of Anwar's case, which we just saw, and held it to be correct law. In Ramajayam's case, Justice P.N. Prakash has held that the CCTV footage recorded in a hard disk was itself placed before court. This was a case where the murder was in fact recorded by a CCTV footage in the road. And the police placed the hard disk into which the recording was automatically done before the court. So the court read paragraph 24 in favor of the prosecution and said, what was recorded was a mechanical process. The CCTV recording automatically got stored into a hard disk and that hard disk is placed before us. So it is primary evidence. We will look at 62. There is no requirement under 65B at all. Then came the decision of Sonu alias Amar versus State of Haryana, 2017, 8 Supreme Court cases, 570. This was a decision by two honorable judges of the Supreme Court. Justice Nageshwar Rao authored the judgment. Here the question that arose was, where an electronic record was marked in trial court without any objection raised by the prosecution, whether an objection can be raised at an appellate stage. So in this case, an electronic record was marked without an objection, no certificate was placed. So while deciding this, the Supreme Court has referred to one very important decision in the law of evidence, which is R.V. Venkatachalakaundar versus Arulmigu Visveswara Swamy. 2003, 8 Supreme Court cases, 752. In this case, the Supreme Court has clearly held there are two categories of objections regarding documentary evidence that can be made at the time of marking the document. First objection a person can raise is that the document is inadmissible. So the objection is regarding admissibility of the document. The second objection that a person can raise is an objection regarding mode of proof or the manner in which it is being proved. Venkatachalakaundar, the Supreme Court held that if the objection is regarding mode of proof, supposing I have not objected at the time of marking, it is deemed that I have waived it and the document itself which is sought to be proved becomes admissible. So by my mere silence on an objection regarding mode of proof, the document will become admissible. On the other hand, regarding admissibility, the law is very clear. A person cannot waive what the statute provides. So what are the basic findings in Sonu? Firstly, that the objection is that they were marked before the trial court without an objection relating that under section 65B4 is an objection relating to mode of proof. The objection has to be raised at the time of marking the document as an exhibit and not later. So this in some sense has taken a new angle or a new interpretation to 65B to say that 65B does not relate to admissibility, but it relates to only mode of proof because it is only producing a certificate. It's a procedure. So again, there was some ambiguity because the three honorable judges in Anwar held it relates to admissibility. Dhammaso gave a different view and two honorable judges in Sonu gave a different view. Thereafter came the case of Shafi Mohammed versus State of Himachal Pradesh, reported in 2018, two Supreme Court cases, 801. In the record of proceedings, it is recorded as, I have just extracted the important portions of paragraph 6 and 8. where they say, however, for the secondary evidence, procedure of 65B of the Evidence Act was required to be followed. A counter review taken in Navjot Sandhu that secondary evidence of electronic record could be covered under 63 and 65 was not correct. There are, however, observations in para 14 to the effect that electronic record can be proved only as per section 65B of the Evidence Act. So while referring to the Anwar's case, the honorable judges further hold section 65A and 65B cannot be held to be a complete code. So they have given a different view from paragraph 14 of Anwar's case. In Anwar's case, this court in paragraph 24 clarified that primary evidence of an electronic record was not covered under 65B, 65A and 65B. So what happened after that is Anwar's decision was delivered by 3 honorable judges. 65A and B cannot be held to be a complete code was the finding in Shafi. Shafi Mohammed further holds Anwar's case, paragraph 14 says electronic record can be proved only by section 65B. That view is not correct because paragraph 24 observes that electronic evidence by way of primary evidence was covered under 62. 3 judges in Tomaso held electronic evidence is admissible and they basically wanted to restore the position of law in Navjot Sandhu. So basic conclusions we derive from Shafi Mohammed is a document can be admitted subject to the court being satisfied about its authenticity and procedure for its admissibility may depend on facts and circumstances of each case. Requirement of certificate under 65 before is not always mandatory. The requirement can be applied only when such electronic evidence is produced by a person who is in a position to produce such certificate, being in control of the said device and not of the opposite party. In a case where electronic evidence is produced by a party who is not in possession of a device, applicability of 63 and 65 cannot be held to be excluded. So they have in some sense carved out an exception to the applicability of 65B by saying the person who does not have the device need not give a certificate. Then came the case of Arjun Pandit Rao Kotkar versus Kailash Bhushan Rao Gorantyal. This again was an election petition. So this lecture I have been very fortunate to deal with this topic because only 10 days back the 3 honorable judges of the Honorable Supreme Court have delivered judgment in this issue, in this case. This was referred to a larger bench. Arjun Pandit Rao was referred to a larger bench where the honorable judges in the record of proceedings say, we are of the considered opinion that in view of Anwar PV, the pronouncement of this court in Shafi Mohammed needs reconsideration. Arguments had been heard by 3 honorable judges of the Supreme Court and orders were reserved on 3rd of March. And 14th July, the honorable judges have delivered judgment. Bench comprising Justice Nariman, Justice Ravindra Bhatt and Justice V. Ram Subramanian. So primarily what the honorable judges have done is they have affirmed the view of the 3 judges in Anwar's case with a minor modification. So before we go to the findings, we will see what the court was dealing with in Arjun Pandit Rao. The facts were that there were 2 election petitions filed under section 80 and 81 of Representation of People Act. Basically what was being challenged was the election of the appellant in the SLP. On the ground that his nomination paper was not properly filed within time. Therefore, improperly accepted material affected result of the election. So the election has to be set aside as per sections 80 and 81 of Representation of People Act 1951. So to prove this, the respondents wanted to rely on video camera arrangements that were made by the Election Commission itself, inside and outside the office, to show that the person did not come and file his nomination within the prescribed time of 3 p.m. So the election petitions were filed by the returned candidate against the returned candidate, by one of the contestants, and the other by an independent elector in the constituency. Both election petitions were heard by the Honorable Bombay High Court, and the court said, please produce the entire video recordings along with the necessary certificates. Because the Election Commission was not cooperating, so the court summoned the electronic record itself to be placed along with the necessary certificates. In Arjun Pandit Rao Kotkar, the court held, though certificate was not in the High Court held that though the certificate was not in compliance with section 65B2 and B4, the court held that there is substantial compliance and therefore the document is admissible. In this case, what happened before the High Court is a certificate was given by saying, this is the video recording, I am placing it before court and nothing more. So none of the conditions which are mentioned under 65B2 and 65B4 were even mentioned in the certificate. So the court wanted to see whether the certificate is in compliance of the mandatory requirements. In the reference, the arguments made by the appellant was that the judgment in Anwar encapsulates the entire law on 65B. The High Court could not have admitted the document without compliance of 65B4. Decision in Tomaso, by not referring to Anwar, was therefore per incuriam. Shafi Mohammed, being a decision of two honorable judges of the court, could not have arrived at a finding contrary to Anwar, which was the judgment of three honorable judges. And also, Ramajayam's case holds that evidence outside 65B can be taken in order to make electronic records admissible, could not be sustained in law in view of Anwar. The respondents argued that oral testimony taken down in the form of writing, which witness statement before the court would itself amount to requisite certificate under 65B4. Secondly, section 65B is a procedural provision. It cannot be the law that even where a certificate is impossible to get, the absence of such certificate should result in denial of crucial evidence which would point at the truth or falsehood of given set of facts. The senior advocate also supported the decision in Shafi by stating that Anwar could be considered to be good law only in situations where it was possible for the party to produce the requisite certificate. And an intervening petition was also filed, and the intervener argued that section 65B does not refer to the stage at which the certificate is ought to be furnished. Also, that Anwar to be clarified to the extent that 65A and 65B is a complete code, and sections 62 and 65 should not at all be adverted to, which means the intervener wanted clarification that paragraph 24 of Anwar should be modified. So it's the judgment in Arjun Pandit Rao is 141 page long judgment. So I have tried to encapsulate the important findings in the judgment. Before going to the findings, the key points that the court had considered. One is section 65B1. 65B1, the court held, begins with a non-obstante clause, then goes on to mention information contained in an electronic record, which by a deeming fiction then made a document. This deeming fiction only takes effect if further conditions mentioned in the section are satisfied in relation to both the information and the computer in question, and if such conditions are met, the document shall then be admissible in any proceedings. The court also held the words without further proof or production of the original, which is available in 65B1, makes it clear that once the deeming fiction is given effect to by fulfillment of the conditions mentioned in the section, the deemed document now becomes admissible in evidence without further proof of production or original, or of any fact stated therein of which direct evidence will be admissible. Section 62 to 65 being irrelevant for this purpose. The court has referred to two Latin maxims before which became important. One, lex non cogit ad impossibilia, which is the law does not demand the impossible. And two, impotentia excusat legem, that is, when there is a disability that makes it impossible to obey the law, the alleged disobedience of the law is excused. So before I go on to the findings, this judgment has been authored by two honorable judges, Justice Rohinton Nariman and Honorable Justice Ram Subramanian. The judgment is unanimous. The honorable judges say, on an application of the aforesaid maxims to the present case, it is clear that though section 65B4 is mandatory, the certificate required under 65B4 is a condition precedent to the admissibility of evidence by way of electronic record, as correctly held in Anwar PV Supra and incorrectly clarified in Shafi Mohammed. oral evidence in place of such certificate cannot possibly suffice, as 65B4 is mandatory requirement of law. Paragraph 39, Justice Nariman says, quite apart from the fact that the judgment in Shafi states the law incorrectly and is in the teeth of the judgment in Anwar, following the judgment in Tomaso, which has been held to be per incuriam hereinabove, the underlying reasoning of the difficulty of producing a certificate by a party who is not in possession of an electronic device is also wholly incorrect. The judge further holds, thus it is clear that the major premise of Shafi, that such certificate cannot be secured by persons who are not in possession of an electronic device, is wholly incorrect. The solution or the reasoning why the Honorable Judge holds so is in the next sentence. The judge says, an application can always be made to a judge for production of such a document in the form prescribed under 65B4, where a party refuses to give it. Resultantly, the judgment dated 3/4/2018 of a division bench of this court in 2018 5 SEC 311, which is the case of Shafi Mohammed, in the following law incorrectly laid down in Shafi Mohammed, must also and is hereby overruled. The court further, regarding Tommaso Bruno, the court holds as follows. What is clear from this judgment is that the judgment of Anwar was not referred to at all in Tommaso. In fact, the judgment in Navjot Sandhu was adverted to, which was a judgment specifically overruled in PV Anwar. It may also be stated that 65B4 was also not at all adverted to by this judgment. Hence, the declaration of law on Tommaso Bruno, following Navjot Sandhu, that secondary evidence of the contents of a document can also be led under Section 65 of the Evidence Act to make CCTV footage admissible, would be in the teeth of Anwar and cannot be said to be correct statement of law. The said view is accordingly overruled. Regarding Ramajayam's case, which is the decision of Honorable Justice Prakash and Justice Sudhakar, our Honorable High Court, the decision of the Madras High Court in K. Ramajayam, which states that evidence alienate can be given through a person who is in charge of a computer device in the place of requisite certificate under 65B4 of the Evidence Act, is also an incorrect statement of law and is accordingly overruled. The learned judge has basically given the ratio in paragraph 72. Firstly, I have tried to compare the old position of law with the ratio that is laid down. So these are not the exact words that you will find in paragraph 72. Paragraph 72, firstly, Anwar PV, as clarified by us here and above, is the law declared by this court on 65B of the Evidence Act. The judgment in Tommaso Bruno, being per incuriam, does not lay down the law correctly. Also, the judgment in Shafi Mohammed does not lay down the law correctly and therefore are overruled. Now, paragraph 24, which I read out a little earlier, and I said it has some relevance. The ambiguity that was sought to be interpreted by various courts was that last sentence in paragraph 24 of Anwar, which said the situation would have been different if the original was placed before court. So therefore, in some sense, paragraph 24 was read to say, supposing the original is placed, Anwar's case holds that section 62 can be referred to. So now the court in Arjun Pandit Rao has clarified that position and said they will remove the last portion which read under section 62 of Evidence Act. So the sentence will read, if an electronic record as such is used as primary evidence, and it stops there. Which means if the original electronic device itself is placed, if the computer itself is placed, then there is no necessity for a certificate. So the court has held with this clarification, paragraph 24 need not be revisited and it is correct law. The clarification that is referred to above is that the required certificate under 65B4 is unnecessary if the original document itself is produced, which means section 65B differentiates between the original information contained in the computer itself and copies made therefrom. The former being primary evidence and latter being secondary evidence. So to give an example, supposing a video is being relied upon that has been shot on a phone camera. If the very phone with which the video was captured is placed before court, that is primary evidence. The device which is used itself is placed before court. Therefore, applying Anwar and subsequently Arjun Pandit Rao, no certificate need be produced. Further, the court has held the general directions issued to cellular companies and internet service providers shall hereafter be followed by the courts that deal with electronic evidence to ensure their preservation and production of certificate at the appropriate stage. These directions shall also apply in proceedings till rules and directions under 67 capital C of IT Act and data retention conditions are formulated. So 67C talks about internet service providers and cellular companies retaining and storing data for a specific period of time before they are deleted. So these will act as secure storage spaces, online storage space, cloud storage spaces, from which possible automated certificates can be generated to reduce delay in producing these documents before court. The court has also recommended that a committee be formed and also appropriate rules be framed in accordance with section 67C for these documents to be given sanctity. What other findings, just the important findings, we have already seen the important findings. I'm sorry, I think the slide has repeated. So now these are all for us to understand how the law has evolved. Now I think we'll have to see as practitioners how and what precautions we should take in regard to certificates being placed before court in litigation. Firstly, what this certificate should do. What is the certificate? The certificate must do the following, which is 65B2 and 65B4. What are they? First, it has to identify the electronic record containing the statement. It has to describe the manner in which it was produced, which we saw earlier. It came from the device to the computer, computer to storage media, from the storage media to the as evidence before the court. Then it has to give particulars of the device as required under 65B4. The certificate should vouchsafe the computer device and the information. It should also state specifically that the electronic record is an exact copy of the original. When should this certificate be given? This again was interpreted differently by various courts, and Arjun Pandit Rao has given a very clear finding on this. The court firstly held that it has to be produced at the latest before the trial begins. Especially in criminal matters, it will give a fair chance to the accused to prepare and defend his case. Further, if the party does not produce the certificate, the trial court must summon the person and require the certificate to be produced by exercising discretionary powers under 165 of the Evidence Act. 165 of the Evidence Act is a very important provision. It gives enormous powers to the court to call upon a party to produce any document or give oral statements before court. So Arjun Pandit Rao says, if a certificate is not produced, the argument that was made saying that device is not available with me, therefore it is impossible for me to comply with the requirement, can be addressed by looking at section 165 and by saying that I am the litigant, I am not able to produce the certificate because the device is with a third party or with an adversary. I can always file an application by referring to section 165 of the Evidence Act, by requesting the court to call upon a party to depose, or the court may on its own motion do it with its wide powers, discretionary powers under 165. So long as the hearing in a trial is not yet over, these are the words used in Arjun Pandit Rao, so long as the hearing, the trial is not yet over, the requisite certificate can be directed to be produced by the learned judge at any stage, so that the information contained in the electronic record form can then be admitted and relied upon in evidence. The next issue is who has to give it and how it has to be given. Who has to give it? 65B4 says, purporting to be signed by a person occupying a responsible official position in relation to the operation of the relevant device or management of the relevant activities, whichever is appropriate. Therefore, anyone holding a responsible position, and for the purposes of this subsection, it shall be sufficient for a matter to be stated to the best of knowledge and belief of that person. How this certificate has to be given? The Evidence Act does not prescribe a form. There is no schedule, there is no form that is contained in the schedule. Therefore, the certificate can be marked along with the electronic record. It can be filed along with the electronic record and marked by the deponent to that certificate. So with this, the presentation on the electronic record has come to a close, and I'll be happy to take questions. Over to you, Prithvi.
Thanks, Arvind. It was a wonderful session and a great presentation. Very precise to the point, and you've dealt with so many judgments. Thank you once again. Now the floor is open for the participants to put in your, to ask your questions, or if you want to supplement on any of the points, you can please come forward and kindly raise your hands in the app, or you can put your messages in the chat box. We will take up the questions one by one. First, Swaminathan sir wants to ask something.
Yes, sir, please.
I'll unmute him.
Arvind,
Swaminathan sir, your audio is. Swaminathan
sir, will be taken up for evidence.
Sir, can you repeat the question? The network issue. We're not.
The full conversation should be taken up.
Sir, I'm not able to hear your question properly.
Swaminathan sir. Wait, I'll just unmute him again.
Sure, sir, please.
Swaminathan sir.
Yeah, audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Arvind, wonderful presentation. I just want to know how a telephonic conversation can be an evidence to for the court. Whether who will certify it?
Yes. Sir, if your question is regarding landline calls that are done on landline connection,
whether you take it up as a cell phone or something like that in the landline, and how it will be an evidence before a court?
Yes, sir.
Who will certify it? Who has to certify it?
We come across this on a day-to-day basis when we produce phone recordings.
Yeah.
When it comes to landline connections, mostly it is being relied in criminal matters, where Section 5 of the Indian Telegraph Act provides for calls to be tapped with the permission of a court. So there, the recording is first provided by the service provider to the prosecution, and thereafter a transcript of the recording is also printed, it's typed, and it's also put into a compact disc. The transcript, the compact disc with the certificate under 65B is placed before court insofar as landline, that is phone, not mobile phones. Regarding mobile phones, we see now that features have improved over a period of time. We have the option of recording a phone call. So the requirement under 65B is only to vouchsafe the source of the recording. So if you record it in your mobile phone, it will be sufficient if you say, I, Arvind Srivatsa, have recorded it when Mr. Swaminathan spoke to me. I am placing it before court. Whether or not the contents are true, whether it can be relied upon by the court comes in the next stage. So 65B relates only to the admissibility. It is the door is open for the document to enter. So the recording is placed by putting it into a computer output and thereafter into a CD and then placed before court. That's how it's generally done.
Because the problem is sometimes the connected portion is only taken up for the admissibility. Sometimes they don't record the whole portion and then place it before the court. Only the precise question.
Yes, sir. So as we saw, Section 165 permits the court to do it. If the court feels that only truncated portions of evidence is placed and the entire matter has to come, the court may call upon. Two, the adversary party may call upon you to produce by summoning for a document, and the court may decide that on an application being made. So generally, if truncated portions are placed before court, that is how the courts have dealt with.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Arvind. Arvind, I see a very big question from Mr. Shiv Shankar sir in the chat box. I would unmute him so that he can ask the question directly. It will be. Shiv Shankar sir, you can kindly unmute yourself, sir. We would like you to ask a question.
Hi, okay. Am I audible? I actually texted the question because my internet connection is not very good.
No, it's perfectly fine. You can please go ahead.
Okay, so I think a couple of years back in the US, like I stated in the question, there was a double murder in Florida. And the only witness to the murder was Amazon's Alexa. It recorded the entire conversation before and after the murder and during the murder as well.
Yes.
So there was a special hearing on whether Alexa itself can be admitted as electronic evidence for the trial to proceed. And the court concluded that it can, and it in fact got to the position where the accused was convicted. Now, I want to know three things. Is there scope for AI to be admitted as evidence under the ambit of the Indian Evidence Act? And should there be a distinction between evidence in the form of AI and electronic evidence in the Indian context? And what is your opinion on the Alexa case? Considering the fact that, since Alexa is something that's owned by Amazon, and it was Amazon, it was ordered to produce Alexa as evidence to the court. Don't you think there is a chance for bias over there for Amazon to alter the evidence, or doesn't Amazon have more power in this regard? Or I would like to know three things from this.
Thank you for the question. That's actually a very interesting question. And I see the question with three components. One being whether in the Indian context, how AI can be considered as evidence under 65B. First, it's not been, it has not been specifically referred to, or the occasion has not yet come for courts to interpret it. But I would place it on par with something like how the Madras High Court decided in Ramajayam's case. They said CCTV recordings are automatically, as a mechanical process, being uploaded in a hard disk, and the hard disk itself is placed before court. So I will, the court said, I will look into the document. So with AI, it's again a mechanical process where the recording is done automatically and it's stored on virtual storage or cloud storage, and thereafter it can be accessed as and when necessary. So insofar as that, I would place artificial intelligence recordings and recordings in the nature of CCTV on par. To the second aspect of the actual decision in the US court, the difference in the Indian context is what was decided in distinction between Shafi Mohammed and Anand Pandit Rao. Shafi Mohammed specifically referred to this and tried to carve out an exception by saying, supposing a person is not in possession of the device, it will not be fair on your part to call upon that person to give some statement about the device. So you look at facts and circumstances of each case and decide whether or not the certificate is necessary. But Arjun Pandit Rao, unfortunately or fortunately, the Supreme Court has said, no, that cannot be the correct law. If you want to produce the document, you request the court to call upon the person who can give such a certificate. Supposing that person does not give a certificate, then the court has said it cannot be admitted in evidence. So insofar as that, applying Anwar and subsequently Arjun Pandit Rao, the US decision, if in the Indian scenario it was decided, it would have been the other way around. My opinion on this, strictly speaking, the entire field was covered by Anwar for almost 6-7 years. And now Arjun Pandit Rao has basically plugged the 3 or 4 areas where there was some ambiguity. So I would say that 65B is vouching safe the source of an electronic record, and therefore it is better that a certificate is placed. Adequacy of the certificate and whether or not the contents are proved comes in later. So it can always be disproved, and the opportunity is always there for a party to disprove. So the certificate is, according to me, not a mere formality. specifically because your part of your question which says, what if Amazon tampers with it? So giving a certificate under 65B will not make the document admissible. Supposing Amazon has tampered with it, I have an option under section 45 capital A of the Evidence Act to call upon an expert, with the leave of the court of course, to call upon an expert to find out whether the document has been tampered with or not. So I think all avenues are available within the scheme of the Evidence Act, and therefore 65B itself can be held to be a self-contained code and it will satisfy all needs.
So in your opinion, the current law is enough to deal with AI as an evidence as well?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Arvind. Arvind, next question, I'll unmute Sheila ma'am.
Please.
And then after that, there are 2-3 more questions in line.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, hi. It was a very fruitful session. I have just one query. What is the admissibility of a clone device? I say a clone device because today when there are multiple agencies involved in a case, assume you have the CBI or the PMLA Enforcement Directorate. So one agency is in custody of the original device that was seized or searched, and then it provides a cloned copy to the other device for the other agency. So what is the admissibility of such clone device? Who's going to, what will be the stance of the prosecution or the courts in this regard?
Yes, ma'am. So I think that's a very interesting and pertinent question when it comes to criminal matters, and especially as you pointed out in money laundering cases. Often we see that what is actually recorded in the device of the accused and what actually comes to court are vastly different. So here, I think we'll have to look at not just 65B, but basic principles of evidence, which is an opportunity is given to the adversary to prove his case, to disprove the case of the prosecution, which is when the initial burden on the prosecution is shifted. The option is left to the accused to say, as an adversary, I opt this document because it's not true of what has actually happened. So with regard to cloned versions, the way I see it, there will be 2 exhibits. One which is the actual recording produced by the accused, and the other by the prosecution, which can be, of course, disproved in court.
Okay. And the clone device, the court has the power to view the clone device with the help of technical expert.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. And then if the court finds it to be true, it can even ask for the original device to be produced at a later point of time also.
Absolutely. Section 1
Okay.
of the Evidence Act provides that power to the court. And 45 capital A specifically says on application or its own motion, expert opinion can be obtained insofar as contents of an electronic.
Okay. So naturally the accused cannot say that this device, he was in custody and possession of the device. He will not be able to say, he will naturally not come and say that this device was in operation and all that. So can the person who has seized and the technical expert who's from the investigating agency come and depose?
Yes. So the classification in Arjun Pandit Rao has made that position very clear.
Very clear.
They call upon the police to come and give a certificate. They can't take advantage by saying this document is not admissible because there is no certificate.
Okay. Fine. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Arvind. Next, moving on, I take a question from Mr. Abhishek Sethia. Abhishek?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, hi Arvind. Thank you so much for that very informative presentation. So my question is, in light of the precedents cited by yourself, so what will be your take on the stage of filing or rather submitting the certificate? So the very good example as you had quoted, in the case of emails, more often than not, people end up filing emails, copies of emails without the certificates. So can the court allow the production of certificate at a later stage? Will that be allowed in light of the recent judgment?
So to answer you, I'll just point out 2 things. One, the provision itself does not tell you when you have to do it. Court in Anwar said it has to go along with the document. Arjun Pandit Rao says only by taking into account the reason of fair opportunity of trial, do it at the earliest point of time, preferably before the trial begins. The second component, the second part of your question is, what if I don't? Supposing I've already filed the email. Till date, I did not read Anwar, I did not read Arjun Pandit Rao, I didn't know of this position. To avoid any technical objection, do it today. File the certificate Monday morning. Because the defect is curable. It says it is inadmissible, but it does not say it cannot be cured. So you can always file the certificate tomorrow and say, I've cured it, it is admissible today. Of course, it may require permission of court, but it will depend on facts of each case.
Thank you, Arvind.
Next question, Mr. Vasant Kumar. I'll unmute. Yes,
Good evening,
sir.
Arvind.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Fine, Arvind. A very good lecture, Arvind. Right up to the march of law, you have covered all the points.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And my question is that during the elections, there is an option to the voters to lodge complaint via SMS and toll-free numbers.
Yes.
During the trial, the witness is coming and deposing the fact that he has sent SMS or lodged a complaint toll-free. He may not possess of that record. How to prove that?
Sir, again, we'll have to issue a notice to produce to the concerned official in possession of the record. And once notice produce is ordered, once notice to produce is delivered and they don't do it, it will require us to file an application before court, calling upon them to produce the record along with the certificate. That is the only manner in which you can prove when you are not in possession of the recording itself.
Fine. Very good. Thank you.
So next question from Chandrasekhar Bharti. I'll unmute him.
Hi,
Hi,
Arvind.
Bharti.
Good evening. Thank you for the wonderful session. It was very well structured, and I would request you to please share your PPT so that we can all update our case law databases.
Absolutely.
My question to you is this. It's twofold. First, is there anything that qualifies as electronic, but the courts have prohibited that from being admitted under Section 65B? Is there any exception carved at any point of time? This is my first question. Two, as a follow-up, have there been any exception where even without the certificate, you can file it, other than those scenarios that were explained by you through precedents, which is if the persons who are party to the transaction are present in the court, then it's admissible. Have there been any other circumstance?
So to answer your first question, your question is basically, are there any exceptions to what is an electronic record?
Correct.
So I think for that we'll have to look at the definition of the word electronic record. It's not defined in the Evidence Act. What we look at is the definition given to it in the Information Technology Act. That are used in 65B is printed on paper, stored in electronic or magnetic media, etc. So it's not an exhaustive definition. It's an inclusive definition. It says any information contained in an electronic record which is printed on a paper, stored, recorded or copied in optical or magnetic media produced by a computer, hereinafter referred to as computer output. So the definition being inclusive, as of now, I have not come across anything where an exception has been carved out. Anything which is generated from the touch of technology has been perceived and interpreted to be arising out of Information Technology Act, therefore a computer output, and therefore 65B being applicable. The second question is whether exceptions where evidence have been admitted without a certificate, other than through the persons involved in the hearing, during the hearing as explained. So for this, I'll give you an example of a case that we actually argued in court. This was an election petition again, and here we wanted to rely on videographs that were taken by the flying squad of the Election Commission. This was necessary to prove that the candidate who succeeded used corrupt means to succeed in the election. By saying that he spent more than what was allotted to him or what he has told court that he has spent. So we wanted to rely on those videos. These videos were recorded by a wing of the election commission itself. So when the election petition actually came, the CDs were filed by us in the year 2011 itself. The matter came up for trial much later in 2016. So an objection was raised by the successful candidate, by the respondent, that no certificate is produced, don't look at the CD. We tried to argue, no, the election petitioner has spoken about it in his evidence. And the person who downloaded it, we produced a certificate after the objection. We said, I have been in possession of this, so I am producing a copy that I received. The other side objected, saying this is not sufficient certificate, does not satisfy 65B4. We again tried to argue oral testimony, it is contained in the oral testimony, so please look at that as a certificate and therefore use it. Election Commission's witness came and said, no, I cannot vouchsafe anything because 2011 the officer was different. We are in 2016, I do not know what was going on at that point. Two, the persons who recorded the videos were not staff or employees of the Election Commission. We outsourced these to private agencies only during the time of elections, and they won't store this data for more than 2 months. So therefore, I cannot vouchsafe anything. The court actually went on to dismiss the election petition against us and said we could not prove the CD, and the oral testimony of the Election Commission witness is not sufficient. So I think this has been clarified in Arjun Pandit Rao to say certificate has to be given. If not given, or if it says, I can give you another example. Your question will best fit probably this example. X goes to a hospital and is admitted. Bills are being generated by the hospital on a day-to-day. About 50 lakhs is the bill that is generated. Let us say there are 100 bills. 100 bills are produced before court in a suit for damages. These bills are emailed by the hospital staff to me. So the question would arise whether I am the person competent to give the certificate or the person who generated. Because 65B4 says a person holding responsible official position in connection with the computer. So now, in view of what is clarified in Arjun Pandit Rao, 2 certificates can be given. First certificate is by me, having received the email from the hospital. I can say, I have received it as it is, I am giving it to you. Please take this as a document. The document will be held to be admissible at that stage. When I go to prove it, if an objection is raised that my certificate is not sufficient, then I can call upon the hospital staff to give a certificate. So I think that is the ideal example to address your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more questions from the participants? You can raise your hands in the app or you can put in your queries in the chat box also. Mr. Sunil Raja. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. I joined in between, but the session was wonderful. I wanted to add one thing, which is one madam was asking one question. It's related to cloning. Actually, technology provides few steps for standard operating procedures for clone materials from a hard disk or CD or somewhere. அதற்கு என்ன யூஸ் பண்றாங்கன்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா, before cloning, both the devices shall generate a code. They call that a GTAG code, like that. After completing also, they generate the same code. If both the codes are matched together, then the originality will be admitted. Otherwise, some doubts or suspicions on the device. So that way it can be easily proved before the court of law. If they fail to do creating the tag, it is the fault on the technical team who done the cloning. So this want to add, that's what I mentioned. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for supplementing on this point. I think, Arvind, we have taken up almost all the queries. If there are any further queries, we still have 5 minutes time. We can just take up 1 or 2 more queries if there are any. I think we've dealt with it in a very wide way. And thanks, Arvind, for this wonderful session. I would call Swaminathan sir to tell the concluding remarks, and thereafter we can end the session. Swaminathan sir.
Wonderful session, Arvind. Really a superb. You have dealt the whole Evidence Act in a threadbare manner. I should first thank Mr. T.V. Ramanujam sir, Senior Advocate, who was present here, as well as Mr. S.R. Rajagopal, AAG, and other participants virtually. In fact, those who have missed it, please kindly see the YouTube channel of Madras Tax Bar. Definitely, you will be missed. The live program was so enlightened us. In fact, Arvind has taken us to the primary, secondary evidence, oral, documentary evidence, and the information technology is took up. Then 65B, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, he has threadbare analyzed the whole issues. Then he took up the case laws, Shafi Mohammed case laws, that Parliament attack case. Then Navjot Sandhu, 63 and 65 of the Evidence Act, he threadbare discussed it. How it was overturned by Anwar's case was also discussed, whether it is a self-contained code, conditions of 65.2, with reference to that para 14, 15, 22, and 24 of that judgment. Then he took us to the Tommaso Bruno's case, which reversed Anwar's case. He took us to the para 24 and 25, and which confirmed the Sandhu's case also, where they relied upon the 2 State of Punjab judgment as well as the Ramajayam judgment, which is the Madras High Court footage of para 24. Was a wonderful discussion on that. Then he took us to the Sonu Amar's case, which has also relied upon the R.V. Venkatachalam Goundas case, 65B4 mode of proof. Then finally he took up to Shafi Mohammed's case with reference to para 6 and 8, whether it is a complete code of section 63 and 65. And last and not but the least, Arjun Pandit Rao, he has taken up threadbare how they have confirmed the Anwar's case, 65B2 as well as 4, then the key points, 2 Latin maxims, and it is a very big judgment. He has took up to the para 39, 43, and 44. I am just right, I feel those are the key confirmation points which he has taken up, and who has to certify it and who has to give those certificate of the Evidence Act. Thank you very much, Arvind. The wonderful session. On behalf of the Madras Tax Bar, thank you so much. I thank all the participants for joining this good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your very kind words. I would like to once again thank one and all for being present and for witnessing the session. I have only tried to express what little I know and I have learned with 65B. This has been a topic which is very close to my heart. And I would like to thank Madras Tax Bar for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I'd like to thank Swaminathan sir for the kind. I'd like to thank Prithvi again for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to thank APS sir, Hemlata ma'am, my respected senior who has also witnessed the session, all my dear friends who have given very kind comments in the chat box. And thank you for all the questions and the input by Mr. Sunil. I'd like to thank all of you once again. And have a very good evening. Please stay safe and stay home.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Arvind. And it was a wonderful session. I mean, I should tell because last night I called him and I asked him if he can do the session today. Without any hesitation, he just said, okay. So, I mean, so that shows like how well prepared he is on this topic. It was really an enlightening session, and Madras Tax Bar always finds it very happy. Like they always give us an opportunity for any young guns who wants to come and take up any sessions. In fact, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., we again have Rohan Muralidharan, another young gun who will be taking his part 2 on a very important topic, that is GST, the applicability of GST on alcohol. So this weekend is only dedicated for all the young lawyers by Madras Tax Bar. So thank you once again all for joining us. As Swaminathan sir has put it, we will be uploading this on YouTube channel also. So in case if you have missed this important session, you can always catch up on the YouTube session, YouTube channel. The link will be shared as and when it is uploaded. So thank you very much all, and thanks for joining us. Kindly stay safe, take care of yourselves. Have a good day. Thank you. Thanks, Arvind.